Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and since we're kicking off the new year and setting intentions for 2025 and making decisions on how we plan to spend our time this year, I thought it would be a great time to remind everyone, including myself, about self-care, but looking at it through a lens that maybe we haven't looked at it through before. To help with this conversation, I'm talking with Crystal McClain. Big shout out to Amy Fagan for connecting us. Crystal is a licensed massage therapist with a focus on trauma-informed care. In addition to her therapeutic practice, she's a stress management and healthy habit mentor, public speaker, blogger, and host of the Creative Self-Care podcast. Through her work, Crystal explores the profound effects of stress and mindset on overall health, wellness, and life satisfaction. Crystal's passionate about helping people not only heal from their past, but thrive in their present. Love that. Crystal, thanks so much for talking with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I thought maybe we'd start out with a level set because I think we all generically know what self-care is. I mean, you'd have to be in a cave to not have heard that term in the last few years, right? I mean, everybody's talking about self-care and the need for it, which, listen, I'm not poo-pooing on that because I think, especially as people get into their middle age, they start to realize that they probably ignored that piece of themselves for a very long time. But you're specifically branding your work as creative self-care. So tell us about that. Like, what's the difference? What does that mean to you?
Well, like you said, you'd have to be in a cave if you hadn't heard about self-care. And I feel like a lot of people have this idea about what self-care is, but for most of us, it's pretty superficial between our society and the messages that we've received for, since the dawn of time.
100 years, yeah.
A lot of our self-care is revolved around diet and exercise and how we look and productivity and stuff like that. Being the perfect parent, being the perfect daughter, as a female identifying person, like looking a certain way and just having this idea of what I should look like, what we should look like as people. And then behind that message of why we should look like this and be doing these things is because the end goal is happiness. If I look like this, if I do these things, I'm going to look like this. I'm going to be perceived as this, and therefore I'm going to be happy. We see this in commercials all the time. Why we're sold, ab busters and gua sha facial massage tools and creams and gummies and the jiggly vibration thing that's really popular right now that's on my feed all the time. And if that's your jam and it's getting you there and it's really bringing you to your whole authentic self, then that's awesome. Congratulations. But I dare say for the majority of us that they're just another money grab. And so creative self-care kind of puts all of that to one side and asks ourselves, okay, what do I really need? What do I really want? What is going to truly make me happy, satisfied, healthy, mindful throughout my day, make me feel empowered, fulfilled, right? Because that's the real goal. We've got this life and we are really complex creatures. And so the ab buster and the jiggly plate and the gua sha tool might not be what I really need to make me healthy, satisfied, and fulfilled and empowered. And so creative self-care is approaching your health and well-being differently and getting to the root of our true needs and our true wants.
Why do you think most of us aren't really in touch with that? Don't really know what it looks like for us? Is it because we haven't given the time to it? We don't do that inner reflection. We're not self-aware enough to really understand what lights us up, what feeds us. Is that the whole point?
That is the point. And that's one of the two things that I really like to focus on. I like to focus on self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding and exploring what we do and why we do it and how it's affecting us as a whole person.
Yeah.
And the other thing I really like to focus on is expanding our body literacy, like really having an understanding of how this meat machine works. We're born into these bodies with these crazy complex brains that perceive our reality and orchestrate every system throughout our body and our stress response and digestion and all of these things, and beyond that there's this like weird consciousness thing that we have, and an ego, and all of this is driven by our brain. And I feel like the more we understand how this complicated system is that we live in, how that works, paired with this self-awareness of what do I like, what do I need? What feels good? What restrictions do I have in my life? What desires do I have? When you pair those two things, then light bulbs start popping off,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And the reason why I feel like we don't do this is because we're busy, right?
Yeah.
And also because we've been programmed not to care about it. Like our brains work on algorithms. And if you've been told your whole life that what matters is a cinched waist and, providing the most beautiful meals for your family and, like making a lot of money and having a nice car, if you are programmed to believe that those are the things that are really important to you, that's what you're going to believe. And that's where you're going to put your energy.
Mm.
And so it's that self-awareness piece.
I think I had a little bit of an epiphany there when you were talking about self-awareness because, well, I've talked about it before. And honestly, I've always thought it's something that's critical to any kind of personal development. And as somebody that has managed people and teams, I'm very aware that some people are self-aware and some people are not. Because, and I've talked about this on a recent episode, when you try to give feedback to somebody, if they're not self-aware, they're not hearing it. They're not somebody that can look in the mirror. But the way you just described it, for me, widened that description of it because it's not just personal strengths and weaknesses as they relate to the job. You're widening that definition so that it's really the check-in with yourself. It's really more than that. It's not just the who you are, but it's what makes you happy, what drains you, what things make your body feel good, what things don't make your body feel, those kinds of questions. And I'm not sure I looked at it through that lens. Creative self-care. I'm not sure I looked at it through that lens before.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that evaluation, part of that is attached to the more like softer side of Sears, is what I kind of, joke about. The things that we do find pleasure in. Like, I really love to knit and I really love to dance with silk scarves and I really like those sorts of things. But
Yeah.
then there's like the scientific stuff. Like, okay, my body needs dopamine to feel connected, right? It needs serotonin and dopamine to feel connected and happy. So, how does the body produce that? What does it actually do in my body? And how am I benefiting from that? How am I getting that in a superficial way? So really, it's just actually draining me.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we're getting dopamine and serotonin and things like that from our smartphones.
Yes. I was looking over here because I was going to try and reach for it because as you were saying that, I'm going, yep, the hits all the day, right? You're looking at it how many times a day?
But it's like potato chips, right? Like, oh
Yeah.
God, these are
Yes.
delicious. Yum, 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 yum. But then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't feel so good because my sodium levels are too high, my cholesterol's up, and like this does not align with my real goals. And like I've just eaten 1,000 calories. Like the smartphone doesn't necessarily fulfill us on a soulful level. And I often talk about the mind, body, and soul because you're not just your mind, you're not just your body, you're also your soul. And so, if we're making those decisions with the potato chips or the smartphone that are hitting a quick fix of dopamine and making us feel good in the moment, not really satiating the soul gremlin. They're not getting to the root of who we really are and what we really need. So that's why we have to be creative. We have to start asking ourselves, okay, what else?
I think one of the things with the phone that I've noticed really recently was it is almost filling in the gaps, right? I notice myself picking it up as soon as I'm bored. Like, I don't care what it is. Like, it can be a 2-second thing, and I go for it. And I've been really trying to pay attention lately so that I don't just get into that pattern. It's just a way, I think, to avoid that boredom or to fill that gap of space, which is not a good thing. So I'm trying to be more conscious.
Yeah, and that space, that boredom, there is magic in there. And it's one of
Yes.
the reasons why we're so overwhelmed, right? And exhausted in our lives is because we're always filling the space with our phone. We're not just watching a movie, we're watching our movie and we're on our phone.
Yeah.
Not just
Yes.
having dinner with our family, we're having dinner and we're looking at our phones. Like we're not going to the bathroom and processing our business. People are bringing in their phones. Like
Yeah.
people are just always putting information through their brains, through their sensory organs. And the brain has to process all of that. And the more that the brain has to process, the more exhausted it becomes. Just operating on a functional level, not doing your job, not managing your family, not cleaning your house, not like doing any of the chores or errands or anything like that. Your body is using about 20% of your brain's energy. So everything else that you give it to do, it has to use more energy. And that's why we're also burnt out. And so if we allow the boredom and we allow that gap in time to just be with our thoughts or to just focus on our breathing or look out the window or go for a walk or close our eyes, it's going to let our brains recalibrate, which is
Mm,
let our nervous system and our bodies recalibrate so we can be more efficient and productive and mindful and creative with our lives.
I love that.
I love the phone. Don't get me wrong. I love my phone.
Yeah, it's
I know.
efficient. Brings you a lot of capability, right?
Yeah, I mean, it does so many really cool things. And I'm not here to say, oh, you shouldn't be on Instagram or anything like that, or you shouldn't be playing your games. Absolutely. But there's a time and place for everything.
Yeah.
So I just think if we create a little bit of space throughout our lives or welcome those pauses and gaps, then it's just incredible.
Well, and I think it's worth noting too, it's to your point, it's not do away with it, but it's like everything else that we talk about in the space of personal development is be aware, be conscious of it because, well, I do think that the claims that it's addictive are true. I mean, I'm not an expert in addiction, but I do think because again, I find myself no that draw, like you're thinking about it, right? So it's like any other thing that you can get addicted to that it's always pulling at you. So I think being conscious of that and actively creating that space, that's not a bad thing. I think just, again, being self-aware, being aware of what's draining you, that's all part of the magic of figuring out what fills you up versus what pulls away from you. So I don't think it can hurt to kind of tune into that. So I'm trying. That's a 2025 thing for me.
Excellent. Well done.
Tell us a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about something you call the functional freeze.
Mhm.
Talk to us about, what causes that, what it looks like, how we get past it.
Yeah. So we've all heard of fight or flight response,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of times people think of fight or flight as we're in danger because that's how it originated biologically. If we are in danger, then we're going to go into a fight response or a flight response, meaning We're going to fight the danger away, or we're going to run away from the danger. That's where fight or flight originated at. And that is the sympathetic nervous system responding. So cortisol levels increase, your breath starts to become more rapid, heart rate becomes elevated, your pupils dilate, your digestion shuts down, reproductive systems get kind of stagnant, stuff like that. We all know that feeling, right? When we're nervous or tense, anxious, panicky, right? That's when we're in that sympathetic response of fight or flight. But there's a couple of other F's attached to that response, and those are freeze or fawn. Fawn is when we try to appease, like if a boss came in and they're really angry at you for whatever reason, then we try to go above and beyond and, be doting about the moment, right? So we can fawn and play nice in this moment, be peaceful about the moment. And then the freeze is like shut down, where you just kind of go into hiding. And a lot of people go into that freeze response because a lot of times, like if you're a kid, speaking from personal experience, when you're a kid, you can't fight off. My mother is amazing, but my father was very abusive. And so I couldn't fight him off. I couldn't run away. There were moments in life where I tried to fawn, but mostly it was a shutdown. It was a freeze response, right? And so what's happening is all of that cortisol is running into your body. The heart rate, the respiratory rate, the dilating of the pupils, the digestion, like all of those things are still being affected, but your body isn't physically processing it. When we run away or we fight, your body's literally preparing you to be able to do that. And so you're finishing that energetic cycle. I know that sounds really woo, but it's actually just science. Like you are processing when we fight or run that, when we move our bodies, there's like a metabolic process that processes that cortisol, right? And like recalibrates your system. So you can get back to that place of rest and digest and repair. Well, because so many of us, and you don't have to come from an abusive household or anything like that in order to go into freeze mode. You can have a boss or anything. It doesn't matter. You could have bad news, like you could be in like financial stress. You could be, it doesn't matter. But that stress response is still happening in your body, and you're kind of you go into freeze mode, but we've become so it has become so normal and regular in our lives that we've learned how to be kind of quote productive. So we can still go grocery shopping. We can still make our family food. We can still go to work. But what's happening is we're still stuck in that stress response. And I know there's a lot of people who are living in this moment right now, where they are living with chronic stress and seemingly fine. Right?
Yeah.
They're going about their day-to-day lives, but their cortisol levels are still up. And like I told you, when the cortisol levels are up and your systems are preparing for that flight or fight, and the digestion shuts down and the reproduction shuts down, and there's a whole bunch of other things that happen, it becomes neurotoxic, right? Your body's not functioning in the way that it should be able to. So you're not metabolizing food. You're not getting the nutrients like you should. You're not sleeping as well as you could be. Like there's just so many things that are happening on a metabolic level because your body is a machine, right? It's always working to keep you healthy in this place called homeostasis where you're functioning and healthy. But if you've got constant cortisol running and you're in this functional freeze response, your machine's not going to work very well. And so that's why it's really, really important, I believe, to welcome those moments of the pause and the boredom.
Yeah.
To really get curious. I mean, creativity all stems from curiosity. What is it that I need? What is really going on right now? What is stressing me out? How can I manage this stress? And all of this sounds so big, right? Like that sounds like a really big job and scary,
Yeah,
right?
can be.
It's a lot of responsibility. But when you start really calling things out on the carpet and saying, this is what's happening, this is why, this is how it's affecting my body, this is how it's affecting my brain, this is how it's affecting my decision making. When we have constant stress going on, that's the part of our brain is called the amygdala that is operating that, which is based on emotions. It's making emotional based decisions, which is why we're picking up the phone and eating the snacks and binge watching and binge spending and doing all of the distraction things, right? Because the amygdala is working. Because when we're stressed, the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational, critically thinking part of your brain, it can't get online. It's really hard to be focused and mindful and think logically and make really good decisions when your prefrontal cortex is being overdriven by the amygdala. And that's what happens when we're in that functional freeze response.
You said, a lot of people can be stuck in that stressful state
Mhm.
and not even realize it,
Mhm.
right? They seem like they're being productive. So I can actually think of some people that come to mind. What do you suggest for people to sort of take a self-assessment or check in with themselves? I don't know, whatever the term you use, but to really feel, see, is that me? Am I that person? Because I actually think there will be people that listen to this that think that's not me. I'm good. Like there's some things going on, but I'm good. I got it. Right.
Yep.
And they probably don't. It probably takes more of their brain power than they think it does. So how do you do that check-in? How do you figure out that?
Yeah, great question. Part of it is an energy audit. Like energetically, how are you feeling? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling burned out? Are you feeling just tired all the time? Are you feeling irritated towards minor things? I was blaming everything on perimenopause.
Okay.
My frustration and like my agitation and irritability. And that absolutely like
Deserves.
perimenopause. Yes. Let's give that center stage. Like that is a real thing.
Yes.
But also, I was successfully running a couple of businesses and caretaking my mother and like dealing with a financial strain and dealing with several like physical problems, right? But because I was doing everything fine. Like I was doing it. I thought, I got it. Like I'm not stressed. I'm not in functional freeze. I don't need to do any of this real self-care stuff. But I was exhausted and I was like getting snippy at my partner and I was resenting uh, um, of extra obligations. Like if I had forgotten something at the grocery store, I'm like, God damn it. Now I've got to go to the grocery store. It's like, that's not like a normal response to having to go to the grocery.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you find yourself getting really irritated at like extra little inconveniences or I call it stabby. If you feel very stabby and sharp at everyone all the time.
Okay. I can
um,
relate to that at certain points in my life. Yes.
right. Oh.
Yes.
So, if you're tired, if you're not prioritizing anything that brings you pleasure, if you're not having any pleasure in your life and you're just being productive and you're saying, well, that brings me pleasure, dig deeper.
Yeah.
But the first step would be to do a little energy audit. And
I like that.
with my clients, when I'm doing mentoring, I will literally have them minute by minute be obnoxious about logging everything down. Like, what are you doing? And then throughout the day, like really thinking about how am I feeling in this moment? What are my thoughts in this moment? And a lot of times people aren't aware of their thoughts and their feelings or how they're spending their time. But when you start logging it down manually, you're like, oh my God, I'm wasting my time and energy on so much stuff that's just frustrating me or is unnecessary,
Mm.
not doing the things that bring me joy and pleasure and empowerment and soothe my nervous system.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I think we overlook how important an audit of any type is because it gives you so much information that maybe you think you already know, but you typically don't have. It made me think of, I mean, when you're trying to get your finances under control, doing an audit is huge for that because you often don't think about the $2 here, $3 here, whatever it is, but it adds up to a lot of extra money. Or when you're trying to get healthier and eat better, you often don't think about the this or that, because you only had 2 bites, whatever it is. Time, time management, doing an audit around any of these areas that you really want to just tap into and get the full picture. So important, but I think we forget how much information that can give us, I think.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up about the money and the food and auditing those sorts of things. When I'm coaching a person, I like to look at the person as different parts that make a whole. And so I often talk about the physical self, right? Which is the physical operations, the systems of your body, your brain, your organs, all of it. But we also have a mental self, which is the part of us that processes information, thinks critically, logically, creatively. There's the emotional part of us that is aware of our emotions, is able to identify them,
Mm,
feel them, express them, and manage them,
that's a good one.
right? That's three. I have to keep track on my fingers because I got six. There's the social part, which is the part that not just manages our relationships, but identifies ourselves and our roles in each of these relationships, right? And when we become aware of how much we're giving of ourselves or I don't need to get into all of it because I'll take up like 12 hours. But there's the social part of us. There's the spiritual part of us. And that's the stuff that connects to our values and a greater purpose beyond just our ego, right? Like
Yeah.
it's how we connect to one another and our planet and all of that. And that can be as big or small to anybody. I'm not like big religion or like big woo or anything like that here, but really, really living in accordance to your values and your ethics and something bigger than just your ego. And then I think that's five. And then
That is.
the sixth one is your safety, your secure self. And that's the part of us that's like the nuts and bolts, your finances, your housing, your obligations, chores, deadlines, things like that,
Yeah.
which sounds boring, and like it wouldn't be a part of who we are. But those things really, it's incredible how the structures in our lives and things like it plays into us being healthy.
Yeah.
If you're worried about, you're always scrambling because you're living in chaos, right? And you can't ever find anything, or you're always worried about finances. That's increasing your cortisol. That's keeping you in functional freeze. That's keeping you, and so to do a little audit of each of these selves
I
and
love that.
yeah.
How long do you normally recommend? Because I think hearing that you would do separate audits for those 6 things, which, guys, if you're listening, I mean, that just means really tapping in with a really tight lens on the detail of those things. So, socially, how are your relationships, family, friends, all that kind of thing. But it's really diving in and really looking at it through a tight lens. How long do you typically tell people to do that? Do they do all 6 in parallel? Do they focus on one for a week and then switch to the other? Like, what's your advice on the way to tackle that and get a full view of kind of what's feeding the whole?
Yeah. Right. We're going to circle right back to where we were in the beginning, and it all boils down to awareness.
Mm,
So the first step is to just become aware of these different parts of ourselves and to recognize, oh, yeah, maybe my relationships are playing into this and how I see myself in these roles. Maybe the finances are a problem. Maybe I'm not living in accordance to my values, you know. So when you just, it's just kind of a kicking around these concepts for a while. And this is going to be different for everybody. Everybody's going to understand each of themselves a little differently. And we're all going to start at more of a superficial level.
Yeah.
And this, spoiler alert, all of this is a lifelong process. It's not like I'm going to do this for a week and then now I'm completely self-aware about my mental self and how, like,
Yeah, I love that you said that. People think like, okay, I did it. Am I done? Like, and I,
no,
no.
never.
Listen, if you're somebody that wants to just keep bettering your life and really understanding how it all works and how you all work, this is a lifelong thing. And there will be many variations and it will just, keep growing and you'll get more insight. But yeah,
Absolutely. So yeah,
glad you said
that's one
that.
of the very first things that I tell clients is you are an ever evolving person,
Yeah.
mind, body, and soul, living in an ever changing world.
Yes.
The variables are always going to be changing.
Yeah.
So it's not so much about um like dialing in the deep knowing of all of yourselves, but rather practicing having a steady awareness
Mm.
of them throughout your life. You know, instead of grabbing for the phone in that 10 minutes of boredom, maybe check in. Okay, how have I been feeling?
Yeah.
Like go through the Rolodex of selves and be like, okay, yeah, you know what? I've been parenting a lot. I really just need to go take a walk with my girlfriend. Being out in nature is something that I value, so that is going to get my soul click, like make my soul gremlin happy.
Yeah.
Going to help my mental self, my emotional self. It's going to help my social
Physical.
self,
Yes.
right? So it's not
Yes.
just like I do this one thing to fulfill my spiritual self, and I do this one thing to balance my emotional self. It's, and this is where the creativity piece comes in, is you have that awareness of all the different selves, and like you kind of make basic lists of things that make you feel full in those different selves.
Mm.
And you kind of widen your lens and say, okay, I'm feeling this way. What do I feel like is lacking? And then you go to your little inspiration station list, right? And be like, you know what? I need a walk with my girlfriend.
Mm.
And chances are you go for the walk with the girlfriend, you feel so much better.
Yeah.
And you go back into your life and do all the lifey things, the
Yeah.
bullshit, boring, tedious, monotonous, demanding things that you will always have to do. But you'll be able to do them with more ease and more energy and with less rage.
Well, I think that's the key, right? The balance word that we all walk delicately around, but it's about you're going to have to do all those lifey things and shit's going to pop up all the time and, crash your world. And we all know it's a cycle of seasons. You're in a good one, then you're in a bad, and I won't say bad, but a hard one, a challenging one. So learning to ride that out and fill up with the good things, the things that fill your soul versus drain them. I
Yeah.
think that's so big. That's the key, is
Yeah,
just having those offsets to fill you in when you're struggling or even when you're
absolutely.
not, just to lift you up and make it even that much better.
We've got this one shot at life, right? Why
Yeah.
not try to make it as delicious and peaceful and joyful, or whatever adjective you want to experience in life, right?
Yeah.
Like, forget this weird manufactured concept of happiness and what we think it should look like, and get to what really blows your skirt up, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's, life is just so much easier. It's so much easier to deal with the shit when it comes, like the big heavy stuff, because it's coming. It
Yes,
will
for
always
sure.
come, right? We're
Yes.
getting old. All of us are going to get older. We're all going to deal with some kind of physical catastrophe, whether it's with ourselves or with somebody we love. We're all going to have some kind of challenge and struggle in our lives, right? And then
Yep.
ultimately, we're all going to face death.
Yep.
And so for me, I'm really invested in making the turbulent ride that is life as pleasurable as possible.
Yes.
Right? And as easy as possible. And I want to be able to recognize when I'm wanting to distract and numb myself from my struggles and my pain and my whatever is going on in my life that I'm trying to not feel, because that's the problem. A lot of us are trying to not feel the
Yes.
stress. And that's how we get into these habits that don't serve us well.
Yes.
I want to feel confident at looking at my stressors and my challenges straight in the eye and be like, I see you, I get you, thank you. Because the stress and the fear and the anger and all of the things that we feel is just our brain's way of communicating with us and saying, hey, bitch, something is wrong.
Pay attention. Pay attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But instead, we don't want to deal with it because we
Yeah.
are exhausted, because it is uncomfortable. And so we'd much rather just ignore it. But the longer we ignore it, the bigger and like weirder and more just out of control it becomes.
Mm.
So if we can look it in the eye and say, yeah, I'm scared, or yeah, this is challenging, or yeah, this feels gross, I'm going to deal with it and deal with it in the moment in a way that aligns with the resources, physical, energetic, emotional, whatever you have, because we all come in with a different level of resources to be able to tap into whatever it is that you have inside of you and deal with it in a way that is going to support you on a real level and not because of a gua sha getting away my wrinkles and my puffy eyes. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
I do.
it just makes me crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and some people fall for all of it because we're grasping at the easy solutions, which, there is none, but yeah.
I fall for it, like if I find myself in an insomnia moment, like I teach this, but I'm also a human, right? Like
Yes.
we are all
Yes.
human. Like nobody's gonna be like, all of a sudden I'm awesome and I can do everything perfectly.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Yes.
I'm a human. If I find myself like with my angry hip in the middle of an insomniac moment in the middle of the night and I'm scrolling on my phone and Instagram's like, oh, jiggly board. This is really good for your nervous system. This is really good for your lymphatic system. I'm thinking this is probably going to make my hip feel happier and I'm going to lose weight while I'm doing it and I'm going to sleep real good and that'll probably be beautiful like this girl in the picture. Yeah, $100. Let's do it. I'm like, okay. It's added to the cart. I put the phone down. Like, is this really going to solve your problems? McClain,
Yeah.
it's not. So, like, don't think if you practice creative self-care, all of a sudden you're going to like be perfect and your life will be
Yeah.
awesome. No, you're still going to be a human. The challenges are still going to be here, but you're going to be able to like,
You get better at it. Yeah. You
oh,
get better at navigating it, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I love you when you were talking about doing these things and we were talking about, balancing, finding the things that feed you and insulating yourself enough with those, not to make the other stuff not be there, but to sort of offset it. It made me think I was having a conversation with my husband yesterday about a concept that somebody I used to work with would talk about, and that's credit in the bank. And you build these relationships in corporate America with clients, with partners in other parts of the organization, whatever. And hopefully you build these really strong relationships so that you're putting a lot of credit in the bank so that when something happens and you have to go to them and say, we can't deliver, or this thing didn't come out as good as we expected, or we still have some issues and here's what they are, or we messed up and this is what's going on. You have a ton of credit in the bank and that holds you afloat in that situation. And the person doesn't, want to come down on you. They want to partner with you on fixing it. Well, I sort of felt like that same concept as you were talking about doing these things. It's putting the credit in the bank, having this system around you of things that feed your soul, feed you socially, feed your relationships, feed you physically, all the things, so that when we get into these dips of lows or hard times, we have credit in the bank
Yeah.
and we're putting more in the bank financially and not financially, but that it then insulates us. So that's what I was thinking of, that concept as you were saying that.
I love that. I love that. And I'm so glad you said that because one of the things that I like to remind people is that don't just do this when you're in crisis mode. You're
Yes.
not going to put money in the bank and build your credit when you're in crisis.
Right.
You're going to do it when you've got the resources to do it.
Right.
So even if you're
Right.
having a good day, like check in and keep
Yes.
doing the things that are going to keep you in that balance. It's
Yes.
not only going to be building your credit, but it's also going to be getting you in the habit. It's going to be changing your algorithm.
Yes.
The things that we do most often are the things that we're going to continue to do. So if you can switch those habits and that mindfulness and those check-ins and the uplifting and filling the bank, if that
Yes.
becomes a habit, then it's going to be easier psychologically and you're just going to have the resources to do it. So
Love it.
thanks
Love
for
it.
bringing that up. That's awesome.
I love that. I almost want to close there because I feel like we brought the concepts together, but there is one other thing I want to hit on. Just as a demonstration of creative, using the word creative and people really checking in with themselves, because you had put something out there. You wrote something about 40 ways to use a notebook. And I think we all know that you can use a notebook or a journal for gratitude posts, checking in with yourself on, writing down your thoughts for the day. But there were some things in there that really stood out to me. And I don't think most people would think of them as sort of filling themselves up. And obviously that was what your list was all about. These things that you can use a notebook for that are sort of creative self-care practices. And just a couple, I'm looking at a list, but just a couple that you had out there were song lyrics. Use your notebook to write song lyrics, recipes, doodles. I would have never thought of those three things, and there were others, but I would have never thought of those three things as being part of self-care. But thinking about it further after I read it, songs, music can transform you to anything, right? It can set off a memory. It can bring up your mood. It can make you feel more dancey, whatever. It can do lots of things. Recipes for some people, same thing. Memories, they can evoke, things that you've done in your past. It can make you feel creative. It can, lots of things. And doodles, same thing, but I wouldn't have thought of those things. So I wanted to just bring those up, and I'll let you respond in a sec, but I wanted to bring those up because I think that's your whole point. Those are a great example of the whole point. Don't be locked into these, do a facial, go for a walk. Yes, those are good things. But you can also do other things, whatever it is that sort of gets you in touch with yourself or feeds your soul.
100%. 100%. Yes. I mean, the idea of creativity is finding new and innovative ways to do something,
Yeah.
right? And
Yes.
and sometimes that's really hard for people to think out of the box,
Yes.
right? Because they're locked in.
Yes.
What I've always done, this is what I've
Yes.
told, and so this is what I believe. And it
Yes.
doesn't necessarily mean it's true, right? And it's scary to break the mold. It's scary to try something different.
Yes.
So, yeah, but if somebody wants to practice self-care creatively, what I would suggest is to start with something that feels familiar. So if you think a walk is going to do you good and you always walk the same block or you always walk on the treadmill, I would suggest trying it differently, right? A baby step, because
Yeah.
things that are new and different don't feel safe, which is going to put us back in the sympathetic response, right? And so baby step your way into creativity. Maybe while you're walking on the treadmill, maybe you usually listen to the same music. Try different music. Try listening to an inspiring podcast. Try listening to your podcast or my podcast.
Absolutely. Or both.
Watch
Yes.
watch of one of your old favorite shows, or I like to keep a note. If you really want to get crazy, I keep a notebook by my treadmill and I listen to nothing And so while I'm walking, all of a sudden, all the squirrely thoughts start going through my head. And I'm like, oh my God, I actually should be cleaning the basement right now. Or actually, I should be doing this other thing. Or some other stupid thought will get stuck in my head. But eventually, the brain will sort through all the crap and then it will come up with a really good idea.
Yeah.
So I stop the treadmill and I write down that good idea, or I write down that feeling, or I investigate something further. Right.
Yeah.
And so whatever it is that you find, if you've got your gua sha tool, I, I don't know what to tell you about that. But start with where you normally are and make it a little different. Normally, if you go for a walk outside in your yard, maybe try going to the beach or a trail or to the town and just try
Yeah.
something different and see
See
what
how it feels.
happens,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Love that. Keep pushing the edges a little bit. Yeah, I love that. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time with talking with us today and sharing all your thoughts. Where can people find you most? I'm going to put your links out there, but where's the best place for people to find you?
Yes, mostly. Usually, I'm on Instagram for my social medias. I have been taking a little bit of a hiatus since November because I've been hardcore practicing what I preach and doing a little bit of a reset. But I have a website where I have lots of resources. Some of them are free, but my blog and my podcast, which is also now kind of a vlog, which is all listed in the same posts on my website, which is Crystal McClain Creative. I have a Patreon and yeah, mostly just Instagram if you want to do social media stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll put those links out there. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.